All right. Good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are. Probably the last day, maybe not, for Simic research. We can. Oh no, my waveform broke. Well, I guess I'll just change scene immediately. Today, we are gonna start at T. We have technically, I believe, 9 commanders in front of us. We'll see how far my voice makes it. As you can hear, I'm still a little sick, but that should not stop us from, diving into some Simic commanders. And yesterday I said that maybe we'd stream Slay the Spire, but until that game releases, it's another like 8 hours. I think it's more like 7, but whatever. So probably not today. Whether I can stream it tomorrow is also not clear yet. I do have something planned for tomorrow. That is IRL. But let's focus on the here and now, or on the, well, there and yesterday for now. Because let's quickly summarize what we did yesterday. Yesterday we started our stream with this 2-mana Merfolk that makes it so whenever you explore into a land, you get to put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Of course, if you explore a land, you will always have a land to put onto a battlefield tapped. And whenever you explore into a non-land card, you can put a +1/+1 counter on this guy. This one was pretty straightforward. Merfolk, Hardened Scales, because +1/+1 counters. Emulative Vigor, because the lands enter tapped. Stuff like that. We didn't get too fancy here. Oh, okay. Next in line, Prime Speak of Vanifar. I've seen modern iterations of this, and it was just a combo chain. The way this works is you start just, somewhere. Could even be a Dryad Arbor. You sacrifice your Dryad Arbor to get a Quarian Ranger. You return a forest, you untap Vanifar. Vanifar sacrifices Quarian Ranger. You get Corridor Monitor, and so on and so forth. At pretty much every mana cost, there is a creature that can untap Vanifar, and then you make your way up to some big bad beater. We use this opportunity to reiterate how broken some mechanics are that make you pay very little to get high mana value creatures and or spells. Personal highlight that I want to point out, Allosaurus Rider, because you can remove 2 green cards in your hand to play this instead of paying 7. And something that I also always try to reiterate is, if you have a commander like Prime Speaker Vanifar, that is such a high priority target to kill, make sure to keep an eye on cards that do something very, very similar. For example, Birthing Pod, which is pretty much exactly the same as Prime Speaker Vanifar, except of course you have to pay mana to activate it. Because you truly cannot assume that Prime Speaker Vanifar stays alive for even just one turn. Because your position, especially if it's not your normal pod, but people in a game store that don't know the deck, they will see this card and at least I would assume that I die if you untap with Prime Speaker Vanifar. So play cards like Birthing Pod, and there's a bunch of instants and sorceries that do something similar. Of course, not quite as efficiently as those 2 cards, but yeah. Next, we talked about Rush Me. Rush Me is maybe a prime example of how I analyze a card, because this text box just pretty much immediately made me think of all of these cards. It was nice that we mentioned most of them already in previous streams. But if we look at Rush Me, she's a 4-mana 2/3. She's an elf druid. Okay, so far so good. But here is really where you can dissect a text box line by line. So it says, whenever you cast your first spell each turn is your hint your wink wink to include as many instants as you can to maybe give your spells flash, because each turn means you want to be casting spells at least, let's say, 3 out of the 4 turns there are in a turn cycle. Then reveal the top card of your library and check if it's something. That card always means think Scroll Wreck, think Sense's Divining Top, think Brainstorm and Brain Surge. Easy peasy. Oh, and I forgot to mention, whenever you cast your first spell, look at cards that have like the similar wording whenever you cast your first spell. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than that spell, that means we're always looking for cards that we can cast for cheap, because we are cheap. As Magic players, we try to cheat as much on mana cost as humanly possible. So we play Rush Me on 4, and then we just warp in a Quantum Riddler. It counts as a 5, but we just paid 2, and then we get to cheat something into play. I also wanted to mention these cards that are pretty old. Nemesis, Mercadian Masks, a bunch of them you probably know, like Force of Will, that have alternate casting costs. So yes, we talk a lot about Delve, about Warp, about Suspend, and so on and so forth. But remember that there is older sets, and these cards might not be as powerful as a Quantum Riddler or a Treasure Cruise. But if you want to commit to the bit of never paying full price for anything, stuff like Reverend Silence. If you control a forest, you may have each other player gain 6 life. I mean, 6 life in Commander is not that much. Invigorate, one of your opponents gains 3 life, even less so. It really doesn't matter. And then for 0 mana, you get to trigger your Rush Me at instant speed here, for example. That's pretty nice. Next line of text that always makes me like perk up and think of a specific card type is you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Always makes me think of Ancestral Vision, a card that doesn't have a mana cost and is usually impossible to cast unless you can cast something without paying the mana cost. And then this last line of text here really is just a failsafe built into Rush Me. If you don't cast the card because it is more expensive, put it into your hand. Easy peasy. Then we talked about Tamio, the 1 mana Tamio Planeswalker, or, well, she's a creature and flips into a Planeswalker. We didn't talk about it too much. She creates clue tokens on attack, so that's pretty notable because it opens up some affinity for artifact synergies. I don't expect you to get more than like 2 or 3 clue tokens, but they're gonna stay in play for a while if your hand pans out nicely, which I hope it does if you're playing blue. And she flips on your 3rd card drawn in a turn. Of course, you can achieve this by cracking clues, but easiest way is just Brainstorm, cast it whenever Tamio flips. You can even do this during an opponent's turn. Brain Surge does something very similar. Inspiring Statuary is one of those cards that whenever your commander just creates a lot of artifacts naturally, you can think at least of Inspiring Statuary, because it gives your non-artifact spells improvise. That means you can tap your, in this case, clue tokens to cast spells. On the flip side, Tamio is a Planeswalker. Most of her abilities are, very similar to the usual template. +2 protects herself. -3 returns an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. We said that maybe the most powerful thing to do on a Planeswalker that returns an instant or sorcery is returning extra turns, but that is completely up to whoever builds the deck around Tamio. And then a -7 is pretty much a win the game where you draw half your library. The last card we talked about yesterday was Tom the Mindful First Year. A commander that I had high hopes for, was then disappointed, and then also kind of surprised by. She's very new from Lorwyn Eclipsed. Now, and it's crazy to say that second oldest set, or second newest set, I should say. 2 mana 2/2 Gorgon Wizard. Each other creature you control has hexproof from its colors. So quite naturally, this will provide a lot of protection, mostly from, I would say, blue bounce spells. Although you have to admit that most of the removal spell in the format is black, white, and then red, and then really those 2 colors are not that prevalent. It has an activated ability where it taps to give target creature you control all colors until end of turn. Now, a good way to find cards that work well with your commander is, of course, to just check in the same set. Low and Eclipsed has kind of keyworded. I don't know how you would call this, like italics keyword. Keyworded this mechanic specifically as Vivid. Vivid means it checks for the amount of colors you have among permanents you control, of course, with TAM. Hopefully that's 5. And there's really powerful payoffs like the well-established Bloom Tender, a 2-mana 1/1 that, if you have all 5 colors, taps for 5 mana. There's a couple of other good payoffs. Case of the Shattered Pact is one of those clues where you play it, it does something, then you need to solve the clue. And in this case, you need to have 5 colors among permanents you control. Very easy if your commander does that. And then once it's solved, target creature at beginning of combat you control gains Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, which is a really, really, really powerful combination of keywords because it plays great offense while also leaving it back for defense. And this is kind of my segue into where I was surprised. Yes, all of these Vivid cards exist. I knew they existed, and they work quite nicely. Yes, a payoff like Sign of Draco, not perfect, but pretty good. Soul of Ravnica, pretty good. Sometimes when you look into a commander, you find that the sub-theme of, in this case, having a lot of colors is not what you expected. I expected it to be very value-focused, like if you control or draw as many cards as you control colors, like Chromatic Orrery. I expected more of this. What I found is that there's like 3 equipments that give good power and or protection that scale with the colors you have. There's an enchantment that gives +5/+5 if you activated TAM. There is an instant that gives +10/+10 if you activated TAM. And Murkfiend Liege and stuff like this is also very much an offensive threat. So really, what I thought would turn out into like a value shell, I think you could really take into a Voltron shell, where you maybe attack with a Vigilance, Flying, Double Strike TAM, and then you give it +10/+10 with Might of Nephilim, because you tap it, and give target creature you control all colors, could even be TAM herself. And immediately you attack for 12 double striking damage. That's just Case of Shattered Pact, TAM, and Might of Nephilim. That's 3 cards. One of them is an enchantment that just stays on the field. So that's pretty sick, honestly. And not what I expected at all. Let's move on to today's commanders, though. And the first one is already a card that I don't know how to pronounce. It's Taunos, I guess. Taunos. It's a 5-mana human artificer. That is a 3/5. And whenever you cast a beast or a bird creature spell, you may copy it, except the copy is an artifact in addition to its other types. That is honestly pretty crazy. Commander plays, I think, all know how strong doubling something is, aka doubling season, making double tokens, or Rite of Springs, making double mana. That is very, very obvious. But this guy doesn't, well, unequivocally double anything. It is something very specific, aka beasts and birds. Now, let's start with birds because I think that's the easier creature type to figure out what the good cards are. Because Taunos, like if you play a Storm Crow, 2-mana 1/2 flying, well, congrats on getting a second one. It's still shit. But let's see if there's high value birds. Well, I mean, I guess Haka is legendary, so it doesn't count. Really, we're looking for things that kind of create value, or at least tempo. Let's see. Whenever this attacks, put a counter on a permanent you control. So this is like a proliferate kind of bird. How many birds are there, by the way? 163, that's not too bad. Let's say minus rarity common, because I don't expect common birds to do much here. Falcon I remember, but it wasn't good. Whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, isn't that kind of perfect with Taunos? I'm gonna say whatever I say and not apologize for the rest of the stream. Magic cards are difficult to pronounce. Why is this perfect? Well, it's a good bird, just in general. It's a 4-mana 3/3 flying, which is, well, admittedly, it's not that great, but whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. That is a great effect, just if you have a bunch of tokens. But Taunos makes it so you would even get a token that has the same effect, which is very sick. Crook, Claw, Elder. Tap 2 untapped birds you control, draw a card. Tap 2 wizards you control, target creature gains flying. I don't like doubling up on effects like this because just one can tap all of your creatures. I mean, the Gilded Goose is a pretty good bird that you're gonna play in a green deck. Or you can play in a green deck anyways. I like Ledger Shredder, it's still a pretty good bird. I just want to give a good overview. I mean, what do you do with Taunos? I think this part is very straightforward. I just want to showcase like the best beasts and birds. But everybody knows what to do, right? This is a commander where you read the text line, you know what to do, you know what your job is. You're just looking for the best beasts and birds. And then we can dive. I'm going to showcase like 2 or 3 that I think are really good. And then we're going to move on to what else can you do? What is a sub-theme except, well, I'm making tokens so of good creatures. So I'm looking for the best of that type. Any suggestions are also always welcome, by the way. Beasts, unfortunately, there are a lot. I mean, Kratos of Behemoth, but 1 is mostly enough. We can still mention it, though. Let's pick Elder Gargaroth. Why not? If you don't know, 5 mana, 6/6, Vigilance, Reach, Trample. I love Vigilance in Commander. Makes it very easy to attack, and whenever it attacks or blocks, you create a 3/3, you gain 3 life, or you draw a card. That's pretty sick. Other good beasts. Unfortunately, beast is not a creature type that, in recent times at least, has seen a lot of tribal synergies. But I know there's some good ones out there. Maybe we leave it at that. Everybody like can dive into this on their own. And then we focus on... What does this do? Costs X less for X to the total mana value of non-creature enchantments. That's not for us. Because then I really want to dive into the artifact side of this commander, because he makes artifact copies, which is quite interesting. Yeah, okay. I think this is kind of senseless to do now on stream. This card, by the way, it reminds me of Star Wars whenever I see it. This is just an AT-AT, by the way. Like... Oh, Thragtusk. Let's reward Thragtusk for being a good card for so long, even though those times are far distant past now. So, Route 1 approach to this commander is you look at the best birds and beasts and you play them in the same deck. What else can we do? I mean, we can talk about mana curves here again. When I see a 5 mana commander, let's see, there are Birds of Paradise in here, by the way. When I see a 5 mana commander in green, I'm thinking of the curve. And the curve in a deck like this should not include cards like Nature's Lore. Why? Because it's incredibly awkward. Nature's Lore, you cast on 2, and then next turn you have 4 mana. Well, what do you do with 4 mana? I don't know. I do know what you do with 5 mana. So usually what I would recommend is to try your gosh darndest to I think Kodama's Reach is already in here. To go 1-drop, like Birds of Paradise, or the Gilded Goose. And then 3-drop, for example, Kodama's Reach. And then on turn 3, you can drop a Taunos. If it gets removed, I mean, that still sucks. But the way this is templated makes me think that it's almost impossible to double spell with Taunos and then, let's say, a Thragtusk until very late in the game. So yeah, don't play Nature's Lore, go Birds of Paradise or Gilded Goose into Kodama's Reach, and then play Taunos on 3, if you can. Much, much stronger. Now I'm curious. I mean, you're making tokens, so you're playing like Parallel Lives. Oh, no, I need to type out Parallel Lives again. Please tell me you find it like this. It's not that difficult to write technically, but I always struggle. Parallel Lives. Oh, nice. Thank you. I love this artwork so much. Get this out of here. I'm sorry. So you're playing stuff like Parallel Lives. Can we do anything with the copies becoming artifacts? I know there's stuff that makes artifact creatures tap for mana. I know that much exists. I don't know what other direction we can take this. We don't need to go super in depth because remember, like, I do this for a video, and my videos as of recent times have become like super long anyways, 2 hours. So I'm happy if not every commander is like a 10-minute section. But there has to be more. First of all, we can talk about you are creating high value tokens. So whenever you are creating high value tokens, I'm talking not the standard 1/1 Spirit Flying. Try and see if you can find populate cards. And thankfully green, because this is a Ravnica keyword, and apparently Selesnya was very on brand here. 2 mana instant, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn, populate. Now, 2 mana, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. In my opinion, in Commander is already pretty good. People oftentimes just full swing, expecting you to die, because fogs are not that common. Populate, if you don't know, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of a creature token you control. Not only is this a huge blowout in terms of somebody full swings, and then you don't take damage, you could also be copying your best creature, and we would then get to block 2 of their threats. Full flowering takes us to an extreme. 1 green XX, populate X times. To populate, well, you create a copy of your best token. There's a couple of other cards, like Selesnya Eulogist, that you can play. We talk about Coma yet. I think I can I chat here? This is the Moxfield list that I use to talk about all of these commanders, in case you maybe want to copy to your decks a couple of cards. In the sideboard selection, you can see all the commanders that we talked about, and that we will talk about, and you can see that we didn't talk about Coma as a commander. Reason being is I pre-select the commanders, and I choose the one that I have something interesting to say about. Personally, I don't have anything interesting to say about either of the Comas. I think one of them is incredibly oppressive, and like genuinely one of the hardest threats to deal with unless the table bands together. And the other one is just not that interesting to me. If you think Coma is super interesting, I mean, the video is gonna come out, and in a stream it makes less sense, but under the videos, I love when people pitch their own commanders, some that I left out. But no, we didn't talk about Coma, and we also won't talk about Coma. No, we still haven't. We've made use of of populate, which whenever you create good tokens, think of populate. And I'm wondering, whenever you cast, this is a human artificer. And it's a triggered ability, right? So I'm thinking, triggers additional time is the wording that Wizards uses, right? Triggers additional time. Land enters, colorless spell. Unfortunately, this is just a wizard. Unfortunately, this is always like whenever something enters, then it triggers more often. But you could copy target activated or triggered ability, right? What do we think of copy ability? Copy ability. Now what I'm thinking is your Taunos has an insane ability. If we could copy it for cheap, that would be nice. Whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, we need something that is triggered ability. So let's add also the triggered ability because a lot of things copy activated ability. Yeah, abilities. So, whenever a creature entering, no, we don't need that. Copy target activated or triggered ability. If you're into Universes Beyond, there seems to be like 2 good cards already. Can we try to activate or triggered ability? You control X times. Yeah. Lithoform Engine. Copy target triggered ability you control. That's pretty sick. Apparently, we already talked about a bunch. 2 mana, tap. Copy target triggered ability you control. Let's double check if this actually works, because sometimes, you know, you think a card works well, and then in reality, it really doesn't do anything. But I think this should work. It's not a replacement effect. Whenever you cast, so whenever is a good good sign, you cast a beast or bird, copy it. Well, that's a trigger that goes onto the stack, and you can copy it with something like Strionic Resonator. So instead of getting just 1 Thragtusk, or sorry, 2 Thragtusks, you're getting 3. Seems pretty sick. I think that's all I have to say about Taunos. The next one I might have more to say about. We'll see. It is the Pride of Hullclad. Or Clad. Hullclad? Probably Hullclad. Let's give it a tag. GH. This is an 11 mana commander, but of course, whenever something costs absurd amounts of mana, there's usually a trick to it. It's a crocodile elk turtle. It's a 2/15. And let's close this. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total toughness of creatures you control. It has Defender, of course, and for 2 and 2 generic and 2 blue, until end of turn, target creature you can control gets +1/+0, and gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player. Draw cards equal to its toughness, and it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. Now, toughness matters, and also Defender Tribal is something that has seen a bit of support in Commander. There's good cards also in other color combination. I mean, the one that I'm thinking of whenever I hear like toughness matters is the Weird Dragon that gives everyone, like, makes it so everything deals damage equal to their toughness. That is, it's white, green, blue. Let's first look for Defender. There's a couple of Defenders. Of course, I'm looking for a few very specific ones. Give me a second. Excuse me. Still sick. I'm thinking of cards, of course, like X-Bane Guardians that are very much defender matters. It taps, it's a 3-drop 0/3 defender, tap, add X mana in any combination of colors where X is the number of creatures you control with defender. Now, our commander does not specifically need you to play defender cards. It just happens that defender cards often have very high toughness stats. We can also definitely include cards like Assault Formation. Again, your commander is a very high value removal target because it draws a bunch of cards. Make sure to play cards that do something similar to your commander. In this case, it's a 2-mana enchantment. Each creature you control assigns combat damage rather equal to its toughness rather than its power, which is something your commander does not do, by the way. And one target creature with Defender can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So this guy does something very similar to your commander, but it does it on a 2-mana enchantment. And it even makes your commander much better because it makes your damage output much better. If we take a look, there's 185. I'm just gonna pick and choose the ones that I'm thinking of. Stuff like Crashing Drawbridge is just, it happens to be an 0/4 for 2. That's already quite good with your commander. But it also gives haste to all of your creatures if you tap it, which is just crazy good. I'm thinking of the 2-mana card that taps for each, was it each wall that you control? And of the walls that replace themselves. You kind of have to skim through a lot of these. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of really, really bad defenders. 4-mana 0/6 defender. Put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. That's just close to being unplayable. Hello, Pharaoh. You really are like here every stream. I appreciate it so much. So yeah, I was thinking of Overgrown Battlement. Add green to your mana pool for each creature with defender you control. I think you will just end up playing a bunch of defenders quite naturally. I think Peregrine Mask, I didn't know this existed, is quite interesting. Equipped creature has Defender, Flying First Strike, and Equip 2. Of course, Defender usually means you can't attack anymore, but your commander has a built-in way to make you be able to attack still. Alright. That's the obvious thing. Let's talk. But I want to talk about Search Engine also. It's a 2-mana 3/2. It naturally has Defender, but it's a really sweet card where for 1 blue it loses Defender and gains it can't be blocked. For 3 mana it becomes a 5/4, and then for 6 mana you draw 3 cards. Actually, thinking about it, I played this card in Standard a bit. It was not that great. I think in Commander it's probably unplayable. Wall of Bossing say it deserves a mention. I don't like Universes Beyond cards. If you do, Wall of Bossing say is pretty cool. If you attack with an 0/30 and it makes you draw 30 cards, that's pretty sick. But let's talk about some different cards here. Because, again, yes, you're going to be playing a bunch of defender cards in your commander that cares about toughness. But this guy doesn't specifically care about toughness. So, let's just take a look at card type creature. And we're not going to sort by name, but we're going to sort by toughness in descending order. And we're just going to take a look at what Magic has to offer. Again, Universes Beyond cards I'm not going to talk about, but those are sick inclusions if you are open to that. Of course, the card that came to my mind is Cherix the Raging Isle, a 4-mana 0/17. And it does have, I think this is just War 2 nowadays. Maybe there's a slight mechanical difference. Also for 3 mana, it gets +X, -X until end of turn, where X is the number of islands you control. This is pretty sick. The Pride of the Hull Clad, is here already, so we can compare the two. On turn 4, you drop a Cherix 0/17, so your commander will cost 1 green mana. And it's very important that even if the Pride has died once, the 17 cost reduction you can use to pay for commander decks. And then, yeah, maybe the turn after you play Cherix, you play Pride, and then for the 4 mana you use to play Cherix, so you definitely have those. You give it +1/+0, and then whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its toughness, which will be 17. That's pretty interesting. Is there some other standouts? I mean, Tree of Redemption is a 4 mana 013, not quite an 017, but you can exchange your life total with this creature's toughness. I mean, that's mostly used in a pinch, I would say. Of course, the Tree of Perdition, the black one that changes an opponent's life total to 13, is much, much stronger. There's some really big, beefy guys in here. Most of them don't seem to work all that well with what we are trying to do. By the way, here's Coma. And for Coma, whenever I see this Coma, I wonder what happened. Like, why is this image so blurry? Oh, of course I forgot to move the image. And this image is so blurry on Scryfall. Lots of high power and high toughness creatures. And for those, unfortunately, you always have to pay a premium. There's also a construct that gives all artifact creatures +1/+1. Interesting. This guy is interesting for a couple of reasons. So, this is a 4 mana 10/10. It doesn't have Defender. It enters with a couple of stun counters on it. I probably wouldn't play it in my deck, but there is a consideration to be made here. This is a 4 mana make your commander cost 10 less card, which is pretty sick, honestly. And maybe it's worth talking about. I'm not sure if this card in general is good enough, but, you know, there might be something to it. We see all of these 10/10s, and again, like, whenever you have cards that have a lot of toughness and power, you usually have to pay the price. Whereas we're looking for, yeah, stuff like turtles. We can actually take a quick look at turtle as a creature type, because turtles, of course, as per their flavor, have quite a lot of toughness most of the time. I'm a bit surprised that the toughness seems to be most of the time tied quite closely to the power. Like all of these 9/9s, 11/9s, 8/8s. I was expecting a lot more. Yeah, 2 mana 08. Card is completely unplayable in most decks. In this deck, it means you can cast your commander on turn 3, right? This guy would cost 3 mana. So, yeah. Let's actually look at the type turtle real quick. There might be something to it. I mean, yeah. 1 mana 05. This card is not good. It's probably not even that good in the late game. But if you manage to drop this on turn 1, and then on turn 2 you drop another creature, it assures you can play your commander on turn 3 and start drawing a million cards. As long as it's your turn, creatures you control have hexproof. Great, I'm already sold. What else does it do? Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Great. And it also serves as a segue. Oh no, so many new turtles, huh? I'm gonna go past them, by the way. Holy smokes. That's a lot of turtles that I I personally would like to ignore. But I am gonna use this as a segue. Yes, we can quickly give a shout out to turtle as a creature type, but this line of text here is something that we've seen at least once or twice in recent years. Toughness greater than power. So I want to look at that. Toughness greater than power. Okay, not that much going on here. Another turtle. As long as you have 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever this or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, put it in your hand. That's a pretty good card. I'm not gonna lie. This is like evolve stuff. Whenever a creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal. Oh yeah, so this is the typical line, deal damage equal to toughness rather than power. And this is also a station line. This card seems pretty mediocre. This effect I would price at like 2 mana. Noetic Scales. Let's take a look at that. Noetic Scales. Oh, funnily enough. Yay. Hey, Alexi. Funnily enough, I played with this card just yesterday. And to be fair, it didn't do much, but it is a very, very good fit here. Meekstone, also a good fit. I love that card. I want to cast it because honestly, I think it's going to get a lot of double takes. It's so obscenely powerful. It's a 1 mana artifact that makes it so creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap step. So, yeah. I mean, the opportunity cost of playing a 1 mana artifact in your deck is super low. And if your deck consists of like all of these 015s or 07s, 06, then yeah, it's obvious to see why this is a great inclusion. Thanks for the suggestion, by the way. Do we already have it in here for some reason? No, untagged artifacts are... Oh, okay. Nice. Okay. So, one thing that I would like to point out is your commander alone, right? He makes it so defenders can attack. That's very nice. This +1/+0 is very essential because whenever the creature deals combat damage to a player, what you cannot do is you can't just get in with your 05 and draw 5 cards. That's not how this commander works. Because, well, obviously it has 0 power, so you deal 0 damage. So we might need to talk about other ways to maybe give your guys a lot of power. Maybe the solution is to play almost every effect that makes it so your creatures deal damage equal to the toughness rather than the power. Maybe that is the obvious solution that is good enough. Maybe you need to give something... Maybe you need to give your creatures other ways to deal combat damage except your commander. So things that I foresee that could be a problem is you're getting in with your commander or like a creature while your commander's out, and then your commander gets removed and you don't draw any cards. But that's just the life of pretty much every commander out there ever, so maybe we shouldn't worry too much. Yeah, I think there isn't much secret sauce to this type of commander. You're going to be playing your defender payoffs. You're going to be playing a bunch of good cards that happen to have higher toughness. You're going to play the huge payoffs in the form of like Charix, which is an 017. And then the good cards that hate on high power. Actually, what we're going to do here, because this commander really intrigues me, we're going to go on to Meekstone, because we know it hates on high power, right? And then we're going to go to the Strifle Tagger. And we're going to take a look at hate high power. And then we're going to modify it so the CI is equal to or greater to blue-green. And then a bunch of cards will come up that hate on high power. And if we want to make this even easier for us, I think we can do it like this as well. So we can go back to our Mox field. And I think I can just paste it in here. Let's hope this works. I'm not sure if they keep the tags here. Yes, it works. So it's a neat trick. You have a card that you know has a desirable effect. You open it on Scryfall Tagger. Then here you click the button to open it in Moxfield. Sorry, in Scryfall. And then you can just copy this entire blurb into your Moxfield. And here we see, yeah, of course we're playing Ensnaring Bridge. All of our creatures have 0 power, so they can still attack even if we have 0 cards in hand, which hopefully might not, or hopefully will not happen. But yeah, that's a pretty cool way to get some extra cards for your decks that you might not find otherwise. So here, for example, this is a board wipe to hit all creatures power 5 or greater. I don't think it's good enough for your deck, but potentially it is. A creature dies. What I'm thinking is, okay, your commander has the power to draw 1,000,000 cards. And I always say the best payoff for drawing 1,000,000 cards is, well, you've drawn 1,000,000 cards. That's it. You have the best cards in your deck, in your hand. That should be good enough. That's enough of a reward. But maybe we can take it a step further. Let's say you hit someone with, this is Disney Dream Wonderland, you hit someone with a 1/17 Cherix, and you draw 17 cards. What are we doing with those 17 cards? Are we discarding them to madness? Are we happy? Are we just happy to have drawn 17 cards? Or is there maybe something that lets us turn extra cards in our hands into toughness? So I'm thinking I want something that says discard card, and I want it to be an activated ability. So in, it's not parentheses, but in quotation marks, we're going to add the 2 dots. I see I'm getting kind of rated by people I know. And we're going to say discard card, and then maybe we're going to add a plus, whoops, to signify that we want a boost in power. I don't know that many free discard outlets. Here's a bunch of discard a card from your hand. They're not completely free, but they still might be good enough. Here we have a discard a creature card, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Honestly, seems kind of sick thinking about it, because you're gonna be discarding a lot of lands if you're drawing a lot of cards. You're also gonna be drawing a lot of creature cards, because your deck should mostly consist of creatures. So this is just like a, while nothing in this text screams the pride of the Hullclad, I think this just works quite naturally in a Hullclad deck. I want to find that one card that just works insanely well with this commander. Something like Noose Constrictor that doesn't have a limiter on its discard outlet, but that is just a better card than a 2-mana 2/2 reach, maybe. Here you can discard 3 cards to draw 5 cards, in case you want to draw even more cards. Haha! Isn't that great? 1 mana, discard a card, create an 0/3 blue crab creature token. You know what the creature token does? It makes your commander cheaper. You know what it also does? If it has 1 power, just 1 power, it draws 3 cards on hitting a player. Thankfully, once you have Delirium, your crabs get +1/+1. So even that is not an issue. That's pretty sick. That's a good find. All right, we're gonna leave it at that. I had one more thought that came to mind, but let's first give all of them the right tag. All right, let's reread the commander real quick to see if we're not forgetting anything. It costs less, equal to toughness. That's nice. You can cheat on commander attacks. It has defender, but this ability makes it so you can get around that. There's also, there's this construct that makes it so defender creatures can attack. Maybe we should add that. And one thing that I really, really, really want to talk about, because if you've seen a bit of my content, where's the Reliquary Tower? You know that I'm like the biggest hater of this card to ever exist. Because everybody puts it in their commander decks. Just assuming that magically they will draw a lot of cards and that this card will do something for them. And they just don't. It's Reliquary Tower. Reliquary Tower, I think maybe it's because it's in a lot of precons. I don't know because I don't really buy precons. But yeah, it's a colorless land. You have no maximum hand size. This card is absolutely garbage in 90% of the decks, I would say. Maybe that's a hot take. I really don't know. But I think it is. It's going to screw up your mana more often than it's going to let you keep your extra 2 lands in a hand that is 5 lands already. Congratulations. In this deck specifically, you're hoping to draw like 6, 7 cards whenever you attack a player. And here I can actually see a card like Reliquary Tower be useful. You're playing a 2-color deck, so your color restriction is not that bad. A lot of your guys make mana, so that's fine. And you're actually going to have these 20-card hands where Reliquary Tower does something. Most of the time, it's just going to slow down the game. You're still going to be playing the same cards, and everybody's going to hate you for it. But I think it's technically correct to play Reliquary Tower in a deck like this. I think that's enough for the weird Crocodile Elk Turtle. And we're going to move on to the next commander, which is Trojan or Trojan Gutsy Explorer. Let's see what this guy has in store for us. Let's give him, wait, let's add one more. Let's move one back to the sideboard. And let's actually move the image and the counter. Give it its tag TR. It's a 3-mana 1/3 Vidalcan Scout. It taps to add green-blue, but you can only spend this mana to cast spells that are mana value 5 or greater, or spells that have X in their mana cost. Additionally, for a blue and tapping it, you draw a card and you discard a card. I think this is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. So the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, you want to be playing expensive stuff, that's cool, play Emoti. We talked about her in an earlier stream. She is technically eligible to be your commander. She's a 5-mana 3/1. She has Cascade, and spells you cast with converted mana cost 6 or greater have Cascade. You're gonna be playing a bunch of spells that have mana value or CMC 5, sorry, in this case 6 or greater. I think for this one, the first thing I want to mention is, again, you have a 3-mana commander, similar to a 5-mana commander. You're wanna be playing a similar curve. Don't play 2-mana ramp spells in your Trojan Gutsy Explorer deck. Play Birds of Paradise and all of these 1-mana ramp spells. 2-mana ramp spells, out. I don't want to see it. And then I think we're just going to refer back to Emoti. It's going to be a lot of similar payoffs here. Okay. Gilrana and Gwenna are very similar in their design. Wait, what's the guy called? TR. That's the right tag. So, this guy taps for green, and if you spend this to cast something that costs 6, you draw a card. Easy peasy to see why this is good. This guy here adds 2 mana in any combination. You can only cast creature spells. If you cast a creature spell that costs 5 or more, you untap it and you can use it again. There's also an argument to be made here to play all of these cards that cheat on their mana cost. So, evoking cards still works here, right? But let's try and find something new to talk about here. Because Emoti doesn't really do anything to progress you in your mana. So she faces the issue of, well, you have 5 mana, you just cast Emoti, and then you want to chain as many 6 or greater cost spells together as humanly possible. This guy is different. He's not, this guy is value. She has infinite value stapled onto it, but you kind of need to cheat on mana to achieve that value. Here, on the other hand, we have someone that just enables you to cast all of these spells, and then they should provide the value. It is fine that your Null Drifter dies if you have a multi, because it's still gonna come with, well, 2 cards, but also the Cascade. Less good if you just get mana to cast it, right? I think that's easy to see. So it's tough to solve at first glance, which is a good thing if you're like super into deck building. Maybe not good for me who's doing this in a live stream. So, first thing I would like to do is talk about X spells a little, because that's something that we haven't talked about so far. So, two things that are nice about X spells. First of all, they work nicely with her commander. I hope this works. I actually never searched for X spells, because it comes up rarely. Okay, so this just shows X spells. We need to find a different way to approach this commander then. Two things that are nice is, first of all, they're flexible. If you can find an X spell that is nice to cast for like X's 1 or 0, good example, because it bridges a couple of things very nicely here. Green Sun's Zenith. Oof, not that easy to pronounce. Is nice for a couple of reasons. First of all, on turn 1, this gets you your Dryad Arbor. No, not this Dryad, not this Dryad. This Dryad. Perfection. Man, I would like to be healthy again. Being sick is kind of sucky. On turn 1, your Green Sun Zenith gets you your Dryad Arbor, which ramps you into your Trojan. Later on, this guy pays for 2 mana to maybe get something bigger from your Greens Sun. Oh my goodness. GSC. I'm just gonna call it GSC. Maybe an emoji. And from there, I think the world is your oyster. Is there something super obvious that I'm missing? To check that, whenever I'm like, okay, I have absolutely no idea if I'm missing something obvious, I check EDA track. I don't like to use this resource too much because I enjoy deck building a lot. But again, if you're missing something obvious, then it's best to check. Up the Beanstalk, for example, is enough to give me a clue of what I should be looking for. And we're gonna do the same thing that we did earlier. We're gonna search for Up the Beanstalk. This is gonna show up. We're gonna open it on Scryfall Tagger. And then we're gonna look at mana value matters. Well, let's hope that's good enough of a search function. We're gonna alter it so it fits our commander restrictions, which is equals or greater blue-green. And then we're gonna copy paste it in here. And then, hopefully, we'll find everything that cares about high mana value. Sorry, not in here, just in here. Okay. We have a couple of things that say like, okay, highest converted mana cost. That is not exactly what I like. But stuff like Analyze the Pollen is not easy to find if you don't use this function. I think you either have to think of it or, yeah, like just know the card. It's a 1 mana sorcery that is the typical search a library for a basic land card. But you can collect evidence 8, which is a bit of a fringe keyword. It means you can exile cards with total mana value 8 or greater from your graveyard as you're casting this, or as additional cost in this case. And if you do, instead of searching a library for a land, you can search a library for a creature or land. So it becomes a creature tutor for 1, if you can collect evidence 8. In this case, we're playing a lot of creatures that have high mana value. They're gonna die, just naturally. And so a card like Analyze the Pollen suddenly becomes a lot more valuable to our deck. Let's see. This guy enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. And whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, you put another +1/+1 counter on it. Cards like this also work. I'd say this is just not a good card, so I wouldn't include it. But, you know, it's okay. Creatures you control have add generic. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. Another collect evidence, but it's enough. Like, just one is enough to showcase for me. Again, think of the context of this is going to be turned into a video. When this enters, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 6 or greater, you may return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That's okay, it's an 8 mana card. I'd still say it's too bad to be played in your deck. Really the sweet spot, and we're gonna take a look in a second here. I'm just gonna see if I find any good payoffs here, is here. This guy, by the way, is insane. You may collect evidence 10 rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. Could also be an inclusion in your Pride of Hull-clad deck, by the way, because, yeah, you're going to be discarding a bunch of cards, at least if your deck is running well. At the beginning of your upkeep, destroy target non-land permanent with the lowest converted mana cost among permanents in play. That seems pretty toxic and also pretty cool, because you're going to be playing a bunch of high mana value targets. Let's quickly talk about the sweet spot, though. Type creature. And again, remember your curve is going to be 1 mana, you play a Fintorn Elf, or whatever, a Birds of Paradise. Next turn, untap, you play your second land. You have 3 mana in total, you play your commander. Following turn, you untap, you have at least 5 mana. Hopefully, 6 mana. And then what you should be doing is you should be... Oh, I hope it still has the restriction. I think it does, yeah. Hopefully, you have those 6 mana at your disposal, and you're going to be playing... Not Arcanist. That's not a particularly good card. I'm just like quickly skimming through here and trying to see if I find one of those really insane ones here. What does this guy do? 6 mana, 6/5. When it enters, you get a token. Toughness equal to lands. Meh. That's pretty meh. What's the best 6 mana card that comes to mind, guys? For me, it's Primetime, but Primetime, for whatever reason, is banned in Commander. You're going to be casting a Consecrated Sphinx. I don't know. 4/6. And you're going to be casting it on turn 3. Consecrated Sphinx on turn 3? I think your game's gonna look quite good. Or maybe you're gonna be casting... Oh, there's too many cards that have 6 mana value. What does this guy do? It's an overrun. That's not particularly good. You could be casting an Endbringer, whatever. I think Consecrated Sphinx sets the tonality that I'm thinking of. Because remember, this is a Consecrated Sphinx on turn 3. Which is pretty insane. The question is, do we have more things to say about this commander? There's a second mode here. And the second mode is draw a card, then discard a card. So, looting, huh? So whenever I see looting, the problem that I see here is both of these abilities require your commander to tap. So they compete against one another. And that means I would probably focus on one of them. And in my opinion, the first line of text is much more powerful. If you disagree and you think, for whatever reason, looting that costs a blue mana is good, then you do you. We are going to move on to the next commander, though. Let's add one. Let's move on to the main deck. Let's see what Vannifar Evolved Enigma has in store for us. Vannifar Evolved Enigma is a 4-mana 3/4 Elf Ooze Wizard. We've had Vannifar, but the Prime Speaker. Now she's evolved. She's evolved into a creature that, at the beginning of combat on your turn, makes you choose one. Either you cloak a card from your hand. That means you put it onto a battlefield down as a 2/2, face down, with Ward 2, and you can turn it face up at any time for its mana cost if it's a creature card. Or you put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control. We have seen in a previous stream another commander that cares about you putting cards face down, and that is Doc Urlock. So, if you've done work previously, don't do it again, be smart. Let's take a look at Doc. Now, Doc, as a reminder, 2 mana, 2/3, spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast, and plotting cards from your hand costs 2 less also. And here we see a couple of things that put things face down also. There's Plot, Disturb, what else is there? There's Cloak, of course, which your commander does. And maybe we find something good here. At a quick glance, we don't actually do that. But, thankfully, that is not the only work we've done. Surprise, surprise, I don't only work, or not the only thing I do in Magic is these types of videos. I've recently taken a look also at 3-color commanders. And I'm not sure if it's in here already. If I've marked it as done. I took a look at all the face-down commanders. And one very prominent one is Kadena Slinging Sorcerer. There used to be, or there was a precon out. You can still buy it. It's not that expensive because the cards are very fringe. And thankfully, she shares a lot of colors with what we are trying to do right now. She makes it so you can turn things face down for cheap. And also it makes you draw cards whenever you put a face down card into play. Now, I've given all of them tags, so we're not going to look at face down cards because our commander, remember, and I can also give you a visual representation if I move the image. Our commander makes things enter face down. The question is, what can we do with that? Well, we could play a card like Hauntwood Shrieker. Reveal target face down permanent. If it's a creature card, you may turn it face up. That's pretty sick, and that works perfectly fine with our commander. Yes, we don't morph a creature, but we still put it down face down. Here, let's see. Whenever a face-down permanent you control enters, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto a battlefield tapped, then shuffle. That's pretty sick. Right next to it, whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it into your hand. And whenever a permanent you control is turned face up, if it's a creature, it gets +2/+2. Also pretty sick. Here, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down as a forest. This is good because your commander puts stuff face down onto the battlefield, yes, but you want to be turning these things face up. So I think that might deserve a slot in the deck. And then, yeah, Ixidor also turns face down creatures face up. Unfortunately, it's a 5-mana 3/4. Which is pretty bad, but if you play lower levels of commander, like lower brackets, potentially good enough. The thing with cloaking is, or turning things face up, if I remember correctly, let's go back to the commander, is turn it face up at any time. Aha, we read at any time. We are thinking Wilderness Reclamation. Because sometimes you're gonna turn something face up during your turn, then you then you end your turn, you're gonna untap all of your lands, and then during your opponent's turn, you can do it with the next creature. think of Cloak not only as a way to cheat mana, but also as a way to always have something to do with your mana. What we can also talk about is if you... So this cloaks, right? It puts a card face down as a 2/2 with Ward 2. If you put a card face down that also has Morph, alternatively, I think you can pay the Morph cost. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Let's see. These two are I'm pretty sure these two are unrelated. So, let's say you want the effect of Ice Feather Aven. Whenever it is turned face up, you may return another target creature to its owner's hand. You can cloak it and then morph it at a later point, no issue. What more is there to say? Give me a second, I'll be back in a minute. Still, the sickness is getting to me. And I'm back. So, yes, you can cloak things or, cloak things from your hand and then turn them face up. My dream, personally, is Phage the Untouchable. Win a game with this card, at least kill a player with this card. We're gonna read it. Wait, fuck, it's black. So unfortunate. But the idea maybe still stands. The huge upside here with this commander is you can cloak anything regardless of the mana value. Let's say, do we find a good example of a card that has a good on-hit trigger? Is it written like this? What I'm thinking is your opponents don't know what creature is hiding underneath. So we are looking for cards that potentially say whenever deal damage player. And type creature, of course. Type creature. Let's say, what do we want to pick? I mean, it could be an Ancient Silver Dragon, if we want to think big. You cloak, completely unsuspectingly, a card from your hand. This is just a ward to 2/2. Then you go to attack someone. They're like, well, it's just a 2/2. What's the worst thing that can happen? And then you turn this guy face up. And suddenly they're being hit by an 8/8 that lets you draw, on average, 11 cards. I think it's very easy to see why this is very sick. Do we find a different example? I think those are like the big, like that paints the picture the best. So we're gonna stick with that. Let's add the Ancient Silver Dragon. Ancient Silver Dragon. The other thing that we need to consider here is to turn Ancient Silver Dragon face up, it costs 8 mana. 8 mana is way too much. We're not gonna play that, or pay that, rather. What we are instead going to do is, well, we're gonna cheat a little. But the kind of cheating that is legal. We're gonna be playing cards like Essence Flux. Imagine this. So, turn 1 tap net. Turn 2 you cast Nature's Lore. By the way, this is a great, right, to reiterate my point that I've made before. Maybe the card is already in here. think the card might already be in here. But yeah, this is a deck where you play Nature's Lore. On turn 2, you play your Nature's Lore. Then you play your commander on turn 3. You go to combat, and you cloak a card from your hand. It's an Ancient Silver Dragon. Turn 3, cloaked Ancient Silver Dragon. Then you untap. Maybe you get in with your Ancient Silver Dragon. Maybe you play something else. Who cares? You pass a turn, and end of the turn of the player before you in turn order, you Essence Flux your cloaked Ancient Silver Dragon. What happens to a card that is face down that gets flickered? Yes, it returns face up. And then suddenly on turn 5, you have your Ancient Silver Dragon. And you didn't do much, you just cloaked it and then you Essence Fluxed it. I think that's pretty sick. Put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control. I think that's pretty useless. I think that is not that great. The secret here is really just, I think, look at the good face-down creatures. Remember that you can turn morph creatures face up even if you didn't pay the 3 up front, if they just happen to be face down. Play the good payoffs, like for face down cards, like threats around every corner is like genuinely insane, I think. Trails of Mystery. Play all of these cards that can turn face down creatures face up, right? What is very nice about, let's say, Ixidor is if you attack with a cloaked silver dragon, you can't Essence Flux it because it flickers, it comes back, it's not attacking anymore. You can pay the 3 to turn it face up. Right? That's something you can do. And I don't think I have much more to say, especially considering how I will talk very in depth about this commander once we go to the 3-color commander videos and or streams, of course. Let's move on. We're gonna add Verazol to the main deck and then give it its tag. It's a commander that has an X in its mana cost. It's a blue-green X 0/0 Serpent. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each mana spent to cast it. Whenever you cast a kicked spell, you may remove 2 +1/+1 counter from this guy. If you do, you get to copy the kicked spell. All right. Isn't that, like, insane? First of all, it's really cool. Why is it really cool? Because it makes you look, and me subsequently, at a completely new subset of cards. This, by the way, probably also a Nature's Lore deck. Nature's Lore, where are you? I love this artwork, by the way. So we're going to add it to Vanafor, and we're going to add it to... What's this guy called again? He's called Veraltz. V-E. Okay. So, turn 2, you're going to be casting your Ram spell, like in pretty much every green deck ever. And then turn 4, you can cast this for 4 mana, which means it has 2 +1/+1 counters. Maybe you're going to wait a little longer. Maybe you want more counters, of course. And then, let's do something that I haven't done in a while. Let's look at all the cards that have kicker. Minus if UB. So, kicker, every mechanic is kicker, but there's only one true kicker mechanic. And kicker is usually not that great. There's creatures and instants and sorceries and so on and so forth that have their mana cost, they have their nice text, but also you can pay extra. And then it does something extra. For example, here, it's a 3 mana 2/2 flying, but if you pay 4 mana extra, it's a 4/4 flying, which is still abysmal, by the way. What is important to note is that if you copy a kicked spell, the copy will still be kicked. Maybe not super intuitive, Maybe it is. But that's how it works. So let's take a look at the good kicker cards. Because if you see a payoff that says, wow, play this subset of cards. If the subset of cards is truly abysmal, then the commander is still probably not going to play well. Looking at these. This is horrible. This is really bad. This is god-awful. This is really bad. Blink of an Eye is the first good card that I see here. For 2 mana, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That is, I would say, slightly below rate. You can kick it and then draw a card. That's a-okay. Consult the star charts is an actual good card. 2 mana. Look at the top X cards, where X is the number of lands you control. And then put one of those cards into your hand. If you pay the kicker 2, then you get to put 2 cards into your hand. So it goes from card selection to card advantage. Whenever you cast a kicked spell, draw a card, then discard a card. When this enters, look at top 5, reveal a kicker card. Okay, that's pretty nice. I didn't know this existed. This is like more of kicker matters. Which again, whenever you think, oh, this is pretty niche, it's pretty hard to look at. Remember, the Scryfall tagger exists. Most of these are really bad. I like Everflowing Chalice. It could be a sweet inclusion in here. It's a 0 mana artifact that has multi-kicker too. Now, multi-kicker is like kicker. Except you can pay the cost multiple times. So if you paid 2, this enters with 1 charge counter on it, and then it taps for 1. If you paid multi-kicker twice, then it enters with 2 charge counters and it taps for 2. Why is this so nice? Well, first of all, worst case, it's a ramp spell on turn 2. If you have your commander out, you can pay as much mana as you humanly can. And let's say this is multi-kick 3 times. So it would enter with 3 counters on it. If you copy it, that means you get 2 artifacts that tap for 3 mana. And then later, these are going to be paying for your kicker cost. Or, should your commander die, and that's certainly possible, they can pay for your commander to enter with more +1/+1 counters on it. First look, Grow from the Ashes is just a ramp spell. Such a library for a basic land card, put it onto battlefield, then shuffle. If this was kicked, such a library for 2 cards, 2 basic lands instead. That's all nice, but it's not crazy. Inscription of Abundance is a bit of a flexible card. 2 mana, kicker 3, choose 1. If the spell was kicked, choose any number instead. Put counters on target creature. That's really good because it means you can copy the next kicker spell. Easy peasy if your commander's out. Target player gains X life, where the greatest power among creatures they control is X. And target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Copying this is pretty sick. The other inscription, the blue one, is 4 mana, but also kick 4. So you need to pay 8 mana. Choose 1. If it was kicked, choose any. Return 2 creatures to their owner's hand. Scry 2, then draw 2. And create an XX blue illusion, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Copying this is quite powerful, but it's also quite difficult to cast kicked. A couple more cards. First of all, Uraga Warcaller is a nice, like, anthem effect. It enters with a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it, and then every elf, unfortunately, only gets +1/+1 for each counter on Uraga Warcaller. Into the Royal is just the other card, but yeah, they copied the homework, but made sure it wasn't the same. What I'm looking for is, there is cards that tap for mana, but just for kicked things. I remember there was a 2-drop that added like 2 mana, but only for kicked spells. Because everybody can look through this, but I want to give a quick impression. Use mana only. Let's look for kicked instead of kicker. Should yield somewhat the same results, but with a couple of additional cards. Yes, I'm thinking of Elfheim Druid. 2 mana O2, add green. This is great. It's a 2 mana ramp spell in your deck that potentially wants to cast a commander on turn 3. On turn, yeah, 3. But it also adds green to cast kicked spells. Actually, we're gonna also... We just looked at the kicker cards, right? We don't want to see the kicker cards again, so we're gonna say minus Oracle Kicker. Because the Alfheim Druids will still show up. Whenever you cast a kicked spell, gain 2 life. That's pretty mediocre. Whenever you cast a kicked spell, scry 2 on a 5-drop, that's also very mediocre. Here we have a land. That's interesting. You can tap it and pay 1 to put a charge counter on it. It taps for generic if you just want to play it as a land. To put a charge counter on this guy. You can remove a charge counter from Throne of Makindi and add 2 mana of any one color, but you can only use it to cast kicked spells. The first kicked spell you cast each turn costs 1 less. Add 1 blue, cast it only to, or use it only to cast an instant or sorcery that is a kicked spell. Now, here again, and maybe it's obvious for some at first glance, but to me, that what obviously springs to your eye, if you look at a commander like this, is... Oops, did I add them to one? No. You're going to be looking at all of these kicker cards. But just looking at the kicker cards as kicker cards is not good enough. Then you're going to be looking at all of these cards that enable kicker cards, right? We're thinking the Throne of Makindis of this world. But then you should take a step back. It's the same as with tribal decks or typal decks. A type itself is not necessarily a strategy. Every tribe, every type has a strategy or multiple strategies that they can go. For example, elves have always been go wide. But they've also been given this sacrifice sub-theme in recent years. Cats are also go wide. I mean, almost every typal strategy, to be fair, is go wide. But they're also life gain decks. And there's also an equipment sub-theme in cats. What is the sub-theme that this commander wants us to explore? And I think it is... Well, it's +1/+1 counters. And maybe more so... Wait, give me a second. Hardened Scales. Yes, Hardened Scales, just as a representative of... Well, your commander cares about +1/+1 counters, and a bunch of kicked cards care about +1/+1 counters also. And also Proliferate. Potentially. Because Everflowing Chalice is one of the most powerful payoffs, I think, in your deck. Unfortunately, like, taking a step back, I think this looks a little incoherent. Which is crazy to say because we have all of these kicker cards, but the kicker cards are just, you know, they're good cards, but nothing besides that. I think Hardened Scales and then a bunch of Proliferate might be your best option. So here you put a +1/+1 counter on something. Here you put +1/+1 counters on something. Your commander puts +1/+1 counters on things. Here we have counters, even though they're not +1/+1 counters. So maybe what ties this all together is Proliferate, which is something that you can say a lot, unfortunately. It's a bit of a messed up mechanic. Is that how you type Proliferate? Yeah. But that's just how it is sometimes. Let's just say Canker Bloom as an example. Maybe that's just how it is sometimes. I'm sure Kicker will return again and again and again, and this is one of those commanders that will just get better as time goes on. But it might take a while until it realizes its full potential with another, like, Kicker Matters set. Volo Guide of Monsters. I think I have a deck built around this guy. is an interesting deck building question. Maybe some would say just a tedious deck building question that you need to answer. It's a 4-drop. It's a 3/2, it's a human wizard. And whenever you cast a creature spell that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control, or a creature card in your graveyard, copy that spell. Again, let's first talk about the obvious, or about the thing that we already addressed. Volo makes it so you create copies of, makes it so you create high value copies of things. Which means, in my opinion, you should be playing cards that say populate. Oh, Volo doesn't have a tag yet, but let's give it here. Hashtag Volo. Yes, you're gonna be playing Parallel Lives. Yes, you're gonna be playing Full Flowering, Populate, extra tokens, easy peasy inclusions, right? And then where this guy becomes quite different to anything else is, of course, it requires you to play creature spells that do not share a creature type with a creature you control. That means I'm not going to call it a pitfall, but what you need to consider is changelings absolutely do not work in a Volo deck. They mess up everything. Oftentimes it's worded in a way where, oh, if a creature has a creature type that you don't already have. But here it's the other way around. If you already have a creature type, it's out. Forever. So changeling that has every creature type means you will never ever get to trigger Volo ever again. And then really, it becomes about how much work do you want to put into finding all of these different creatures. I have a Volo deck built. We built it for a friend. It is extremely strong. First step we did was Volo is a 4-mana commander. It's incredibly powerful. You want it as quickly as possible. So you're going to be playing all of these creatures. Very important. Not nature's lore, but creatures that ramp. Best case, they don't have that many creature types. So, for example, this little cute mole druid guy, 2 mana, 1/3, it taps for 1 mana. Now, druid is a creature type that you need to take a good look at. There's a lot of elf druids. I think this might be in here because it's cute, not because it's good. You want to restrict the creature types as much as possible. So, for example, if we take a look at the 2 mana ramp suite here, it's a fairy, it's a mole druid, it's a dryad, it's a plant, it's a frog. And here we have a wall and a thopter and whatnot, right? So that's the first step is you have a 4-mana commander, play ramp on 2. Almost sounds like a Remy song, me listing all of that, all of those cards. And then, well, you're gonna be diving into all of, like, every creature type there is. There's a good jellyfish, there's a good whale, there's a good salamander, there is a good insect, a homunculus, a spider, toy, a boar, dragon, merfolk. Magic has so many creature types that it really is up to you to just find whatever you want to play. A Kraken horror, there's only one good one. Here we have a spirit, a worm. Yeah, all of these cards. Copy, proliferate, populate, triggered abilities that you can copy, also pretty good. And of course, Guardian Project. I mean, it's an okay card in every deck in Commander, pretty much, but yeah. This one is really... Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's a bit tedious to build around. We're gonna be finding a good griffin, and whatever creature type comes to mind, you can look at it and see if it has a good creature in it. We need to refresh, unfortunately, as this is not updated live. I don't think I have much more to say about Volo. Volo is very straightforward. It is also one of those must-kill commanders. So make sure the cards that you're playing are actually good. yeah, to summarize, play creatures that ramp onto, play cards that create extra tokens or that populate, and then look at every creature type you could possibly imagine and find the best card. That's it. And don't play Changeling. From Volo to Voril. Let's add one. Ugh. All of these double, and now I need to make a 3-letter name tag. Yeah. Move one to the main deck. This guy's a 3-drop, 1/4, human merfolk, double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. Oh god. Artifact, creature, or land. That is crazy. Is it not? Okay, so first thing that I would consider is Everflowing Chalice, and I think it's Astral Cornucopia. These guys will be the bread and butter of your deck. 0 mana artifacts that enter with counters, and they tap for each counter. They add 1 mana for each counter. Doubling that makes it so you can cast a lot more spells than you could usually do. As we've seen, well, Kicker adds a bunch of counters. Man, my chair is so loud. Other things that enter with counters are cards like, I'm not gonna put it in the deck, Verazol, because they have X in their mana cost, and then they enter with X. We can add any Hydra ever, probably. Let's say Bristling Hydra, whatever, the Genesis Hydra. Let's take Genesis Hydra. Change tags. VOR. Damn, I forgot to move it twice, huh? Where's the Genesis Hydra, by the way? Genesis is already in here? Genesis? It actually is. That's so funny. So bread and butter is gonna be these artifacts that have counters on them and that tap for each counter. Next, you're gonna be playing creatures that enter with a couple of counters. So Genesis Hydra, 2 green, 0/0, but X in the mana cost. When you cast a spell, reveal the top X cards of your library and then put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. The idea here is you're casting Everflowing Chalice for 2. Voril makes it so the counters go up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And then you can cast a huge X spell that enters with X counters that later you can then double. There's a couple more things that care about you having a bunch of counters on them. For example, stuff like the Millennium Calendar. Millennium Calendar is a 1 mana artifact. Whenever you untap 1 or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the calendar. For 2 and tap, you double the number of time counters on the calendar. And then, when there are 1,000 or more time counters on the Millennium Calendar, sacrifice it, and each opponent loses 1,000 life. Doubling is insanely powerful. So let's say you play this on 1. Next turn, you untap a land. This goes to 1 counter. On turn 2, you play an Everflowing Chalice, and you already tap 2 lands. You tap the Everflowing Channel. This untaps, and it goes to 5, right? And then you can double it to 10, to 20, to 40, and so on and so forth. I think that one's very obvious. There's also the Darksteel Reactor. Darksteel Reactor. 4 mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a charge counter on this, and if it has 20 or more charge counters on it, you win the game. Very important for both of these, by the way. Oftentimes, these alternate win cons are restricted to at end of turn, or most of the time, to be fair, at beginning of upkeep. Both of these just do win you the game immediately, unless someone has more than 1000 life, which is unlikely from what I've seen. There's one more, isn't there, like a Helix? Isn't it like a Pinnacle Helix or something? Helix Pinnacle. 1 mana. Shroud. X. Oh, it has Shroud. Also, you can't target it. So, this one's out. Remember, Shroud is not hexproof. Even you can't target this. So you also can't target it with this guy's ability. And then really here, I mean... Wait. Let's just look for a wave. I'm not gonna embarrass myself again. Wait. What's it called? Oh, no, sorry. It's the Tide. You're really gonna go all in, I think, unfortunately, into Proliferate. Whenever you cast the spell Proliferate. Stuff like that will end up in your deck more often than not. Every good card that you can think of, because doubling is only good if there's already a certain amount of counters on something. Because if you pay 2 and tap this guy to add 1 counter to Everflowing Chalice, you're getting 2 mana worth for your commander, and that is just not good enough in my opinion. So, unfortunately, I think this is one of the many decks where Proliferate is king. And then your commander just takes it to an absurd level, especially with alternate win cons of, let's say, Darksteel Reactor, where you just get this to 5, then you double it, and maybe you double it again, and you win the game immediately. I'm curious. I'm gonna take a quick look. Yes, creatures are obvious. Artifacts are obvious. Oh, yeah, by the way, the enchantment, of course, also didn't work because you can't target enchantments. I'm curious about lands. No. We want lands that enter with counters. And we want them to be good. So, for example, stuff like Blast Zone, that's okay. It's one of those. It's a land that you can sacrifice to kill everything that has a mana value equal to the counters on this. But that's not good enough for me. I'm thinking of stuff like, well, City of Shadows. It's a land that taps to exile a creature you control to put a storage counter on this land. And then it also taps to add 1 colorless mana for each storage counter on this land. This works similar to your artifacts, as in, it comes down with maybe 1 counter, but it's going to be the base on how you get your high mana value X spells, for example, your Hydras out, and with a bunch of counters already, so you can then double those counters. Because remember, doubling 1 or 2 or 3 counters, potentially, if they're +1/+1 counters, is not that great. Interesting, you could double the amount of ice counters on Marid Lage's Dark Depths. Sick, bro. But this is the type of land that I'm looking for. And I know there's more, exactly, right? There's some lands that are probably underplayed in Commander. And those are the depletion lands from Mercadian Masks. It's a forest that comes into, or sorry, it's a green land that comes into play tapped with 2 depletion counters on it. You tap it and remove a depletion counter from it to add 2 green mana to your mana pool. If there are no depletion counters left on this, you sacrifice it. Similar but different is Hollow Trees. Also comes into play tapped. You may choose not to untap this, in your untap phase, and instead put a storage counter on it. It taps to remove X storage counters from hollow trees to add an amount of green equal to your equal to the storage counter you removed to your mana pool. The idea here is I would almost treat this as if it were a spell, potentially, where, yeah, like, you get this down, you get one counter on it, and then we're not going to use our commander, but remember, we're going to proliferate a bunch. There's blue equivalents, which I'm going to add. Wait, this guy, put a storage counter on it, remove any number of storage counter from this, add 1 green. Oh, is this just a better version? Any number of storage counters, add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each storage counter removed this way. So you see there's a bunch of lands that you could make use of. Oh, gorgeous artwork, by the way. Mostly the depletion lands and these storage lands. And I think that's probably it. Here we have lands that tap for any color, but we want a lot of color instead. A lot of mana instead. Do we need to point out more proliferate cards? Personally, I think they're quite obvious, but might not be the same for everyone. Let's just get one more in for good measure. No, I don't want to drop Scryfall cards in here. Let's just look for proliferate. Maybe there's a particularly good one in here. Canker Bloom is just generically good. I like these cards that are flexible. Destroy artifact, enchantment, or creature flying. If the mana value was 3 or less, proliferate. That's just good in general. Here, draw a card, proliferate. It's good enough in your deck for sure. I love Dreamtide Whale. It's a 3 mana 7/5. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, proliferate. You can be one of those players, but your opponents are going to do you the favor of double spelling a lot more often than you might think. It seems we haven't talked about proliferate all that much in the Simic list, which is very surprising to me. But sometimes I shy away from stuff like this because it's a bit overused. Not because I think it's bad to use it a lot, but because it's so good that a lot of people do it. But here it's undeniable that if you're playing a bunch of cards like City of Shadows, that it's very powerful to proliferate. My personal shout out to you guys would be Dreamtide Whale, because yeah, like, it's a 3 mana 7/5, and every player has a chance to trigger your proliferate, which is, pretty powerful. 2 more commanders. The next one is a Salamander Serpent, which could be a good card for your Volo deck, except it's legendary, so probably not. Tips for Wilson and Sailor Coast. Can you be a bit more specific? Dual commander, Wilson and Sailor Coast. What the hell is Wilson? Oh, okay, so Wilson. Spell can't be countered, Vigilance, Reach, Trample. And Sailor Coast. Vigilance, Reach, Trample, War 2, choose a background. We might not dive into that yet. Commander creatures. You know what? Okay, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than the player, this creature can't be blocked this turn. You know what we're gonna do? I'm sorry, but we will have to postpone talking about those guys for a very specific reason, and that is I chose deliberately to not talk about background combinations and partners, because it's just too much. Those deserve their own video, and we will probably make that video before we move on to 3 colors. Sword Coast Sailors. Because, yeah, there's just too many combinations here. Whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than a player, creature can't be blocked. But is it that complicated? I'm not sure if I have tips for you. It seems very straightforward. This is like, it seems quite straightforward. One thing that I will say, that is not straightforward. Goodness gracious. Which commander did we talk about here? So the limiting factor on that combination of commanders is that you can't always attack the person that you want to attack. And that sucks. But there is a workaround because there's a bunch of cards that make opponents gain life. We talked about those cards yesterday. Yeah. I think this, just to pitch you one card, and then we're gonna move on or like get back to the actual topic of today's stream. Invigorate is one of those cards that is insane for your Wilson / Sword Coast Sailor deck. If you control a forest, you may have an opponent gain 3 life. This line of text will make it so sometimes you get to attack the player that you actually want to attack, because in life total they might be slightly below someone else, but you want to hit them for whatever reason, and then you can have them gain 3 life. Now, intuitively, having them gain 3 life, of course, is bad because you're on an aggro deck, but remember that commander damage just outright kills anyone if you reach 21, even if they have 1,000,000 life. So I would never worry about someone gaining 3 life. And then +4/+4 is just great in a deck that is a Voltron deck in green. There's a couple of these cards you can look at the phrase rather than pay, and you'll find more of these. You can probably go, like, you may have player gain also on Scryfall or Moxfield, and you'll find a bunch of these. But let's get back to the Salamander in the room. 6 mana, 6/6. Whenever, yep, I'm not going to pronounce it, enters the battlefield or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. That land is an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. At the beginning of your end step, untap each permanent you control with a counter on it. Oh my god, that's disgusting. Okay, let's take a quick peek because I know there is more cards that add flood counters. The land stays an island until the flood counter is removed, even if this guy leaves the battlefield. And it also retains all of its abilities. Let's first look at flood counters, because before we move on to all the obvious, like, broken stuff. There's 2 cards that add flood counters. One is Bounty of the Luxa. 4 mana at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all flood counters from this. If no counters were removed this way, aka the first turn after you played this, you put a flood counter on it and draw a card. Then the next turn you add mana, and then you draw, and then you add mana, and then you draw, and you add mana. Card is not that great. I'm still gonna talk about it in the video because it adds flood counters. The other one is Quicksilver Fountain. 3 mana. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a flood counter on target non-island land he or she controls. That land is an island as long as it has a flood counter on it. At end of turn, if all lands in play are islands, remove all flood counters from them. This makes it so your opponents are gonna get mana screwed because, well, they'll have islands. And it makes it so you can put more flood counters on your lands, which means you get to untap more lands at end of turn. Right? Because at the beginning of your end step, untap each land you control with a counter on it. That seems pretty broken. This line of text, all in all, seems, by the way, incredibly broken. We just talked about lands because it doesn't need to be a flood counter, right? It specifically does not mention flood counters. We just looked at lands. Land counter. Sorry, counter, and it needs to be a land. We just looked at lands that enter with counters. It's important that the lands don't need a lot of counters, unlike what we just looked at. But stuff like Blast Zone, right? It's a colorless land. It doesn't enter tapped, so there really is very little downside. But it comes with a counter, so once you have your commander, this land untaps at end of turn all the time. Similar, we have there's a couple of these land. There's maybe not Gemstone Mine, but like Gemstone Caverns, a really good land that if you have high power level tables, I think you should be playing in pretty much every deck. I might be wrong. But if it's in your opening hand and you're not first, you can put this into play and exile a card from your hand. And then it has a counter on it, a luck counter on it. That's pretty sick already, but if it untaps every turn, hallelujah. That's insane. And I mean, this is a $30 card, but there is cheaper ones as well. There is like, I know there was one that was played in Modern for a little while. Could be depletion lands, but they might not be quite as good. It could even be something like Tendo Ice Bridge. It enters with a charge counter on it, and it taps for generic, and then you can remove a charge counter from it to add 1 mana of any color. It's worse than the explosive land, whatever it was called. But it still enters with a counter on it, and it untaps at the end of every turn that you have. It's pretty sick. Or here, like these Vivid Creek, Vivid Grove type lands. The cost is they are tapped lands. That's pretty bad, I'll admit that. But once you have your commander, they untap end of turn. Of course, though, like, where this commander really shines is, well, I mean, we already talked about these 2 artifacts that have a bunch of counters on them, Astral Cornucopia and Everflowing Chalice, that produce also insane amounts of mana. And getting to untap those is pretty sick. But, like, this effect is so powerful, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. You could just be playing a bunch of creatures that have +1/+1 counters on them. And full swing every round and have them have pseudo vigilance. Like, it's kind of crazy how flexibly, how flexible this card is in deck building, and like it will make kind of everything strong, in my opinion. This first line of text you can completely ignore, almost. Because the second line of text is so overbearingly powerful. Beginning of your end step, untap each permanent you control with a counter on it. Yeah, that's just insane, I'm sorry. Like, yeah, Dreamtide Whale, by the way, is insane again. Because it has time counters on it, and you can proliferate. So it's like a nice bridge between the last 2 commanders. And like, I really don't care what else you do with it. Just play any good creature that has a +1/+1 counter on it, attack with it, and untap it. It's like, it is Seedborn Muse, but as your commander. If you build your deck correctly. That seems pretty nasty. I'm not gonna lie. But it also means I don't want to dive too deep into this. I think the most interesting part from my point of view is those lands and those artifacts that you just... Well, I guess what we could say again is this is where Flash really shines. So let's see. Let's see if there's like a good Flash card that I want to give a shout out. I don't really think so, that there's one specific one. But this card is insane, but you have an Amphibian Downpour in your deck. You play your commander, It's whatever, turn 4 or 5. You have already in play your Tendo Ice Bridge, your Vivid Grove. Wait, and there's the one Druid. It's probably not in here. You play this guy, you end your turn, these 3 lands untap, and then you have your Amphibian Downpour or your protection spell up. It's just kind of absurd. Oh well. Absurd is not a bad thing. But let's talk about the last commander on the list before I end like my stream. Zimone. There's a couple of Zimones. I decided to go for the Mystery Unraveler, a 4-mana 3/3 human wizard. Landfall. Whenever a land enters under your control, manifest Dread if it's the first time this ability resolved. Otherwise, you may turn a permanent you control face up. Now, Manifest Dread is, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2, and the other one into your graveyard. The face down card you can turn face up for its mana cost at any point in time, if it's a creature card. So this is kind of a spin. Did we give it its tag already? No. It's a bit confusing and a bit annoying that we have like Cloak, Manifest Dread, and I believe like Manifest and Morph, all of these things that put cards face down that have slightly different wordings. But the principle still applies. We had Vanifar, who cloaks cards from your hands. And here, of course, we're still going to play Threats Around the Corner. Right? We're still going to be playing Trails of Mystery. We're still going to be playing Ixidor. And the same principle also applies here. If you manifest into a Morph card, then you can still pay the Morph cost instead of paying the mana cost, although it would be a net negative in this case. One thing that I would like to mention here is, and something that I haven't said in a while, by the way, for Vanifar, if we take a quick comparison of Vanifar. So Vanifar cloaks your Ancient Silver Dragon, and then your Ancient Silver Dragon attacks, and you need assistance of, let's say, an Ixidor to turn it face up, because the mana cost is extremely high. Or an Essence Flux, but then you don't get the attack trigger. Or sorry, the on-hit trigger. What is quite different here is, you've played your Zimone, and you've you've manifested Dread into your Ancient Silver Dragon. You go to attack with your Ancient Silver Dragon, your opponent thinks nothing of it, because what's the worst that can happen, right? You've already played your land for turn, because that's what you do, main phase 1, and then before damage, you crack your Flooded Strand. And because it will be the second time your landfall ability triggers, you may turn a permanent you control face up. So, here we have a commander that enables these big beefy beaters in quite a different way than Vanifar does. Vanifar, she puts him face down and then you need assistance to turn him face up, because nobody's going to pay 8 mana for this. Who are we? Hearthstone players? We're not doing fair stuff. We're cheating stuff into play. So what I would recommend is, if you want to go, because what you could also do, you know, is you play Simone, maybe you manifest Dread with your first landfall trigger into Ancient Silver Dragon, and then you cast your, well, I'm always coming back to it because everybody knows it. Then you cast your Nature's Lore, and you turn your Ancient Silver Dragon face up at sorcery speed. But first of all, where's the fun in that? And second of all, I think it's just genuinely worse to do that. It takes away the surprise factor, and just keeping your opponents in the dark for as long as possible is what you should be aiming for. And here I think I'm actually going to talk about something real quick. I recently started building packages for myself, for others to use. And these packages, I assorted them by type, and I hope the types are worth it. Zimone really cares about landfall triggers, and everybody knows that landfall triggers and fetch lands go hand in hand. But also everybody knows that Flooded Strand, which I believe is one of the cheaper fetch lands, is still a 13 euro card. There is a couple of slightly less playable fetch lands. One example of a card that is much, much cheaper, but still quite worth it, in my opinion, is Fabled Passage. It's a fetch land of sort that only fetches basic lands. And the land enters tapped unless you control 4 or more lands. Then that land gets untapped. Now, this is, of course, a much worse card than a Flooded Strand, but your commander's ability is so incredibly powerful that I would try to get my hands on as many even remotely decent fetch lands as humanly possible. Now, I might not have included them in here, but there is a couple from Streets of New Capenna. Oh, secondary fetches, I did. So, for example, Bent Panorama is a perfectly fine land drop if you don't play them in spades, because it enters untapped and it taps for generic, right? But you can also pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to search a library for a basic forest, plains, or island card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Now you're saying, well, it's a fetch land, but it costs mana. Isn't that bad? It's bad, but Zimone herself is your card advantage and your mana cheat. All you need to do, literally all you need to do, is play cards like Ancient Silver Dragons and play fetches, and Zimone will do all the heavy lifting in your deck. I am almost certain that is how it's going to play out, especially if you have like these secondary payoffs like Trail of Mystery and threats around every corner. And there's more than this. These are from Shards of Alara. Let's say they are the untapped colorless fetches. I don't know if they have an official name. There's also the I think they're not necessarily from Modern Horizons. Yeah, Tarkir, Dragonstorm, Modern Horizons. Okay, so there's also these. These are better technically, but unfortunately, they all actually have a color identity, whereas the panoramas do not. I think those are the panorama lands, by the way. So yeah, all of these panoramas, all of your evolving wilds, of course. I mean, most people are playing those already, and they just become actually good cards in a Zimone deck. Which, by the way, I did not move on to. Oh my god, I'm so bad today with moving the the image top left. Myriad Landscape. Like, all of these lands that, in my opinion, are overplayed and, like, really not that strong in normal commander decks, suddenly become insanely good. Similar, like, Terminal Moraine. It is an untapped land that taps for generic. That is completely okay. And then you can sacrifice it to get a basic and trigger Zimone the second time. So maybe I'll use this as like a sales pitch in the video to talk about this card, or like, about this list of cards. Because these secondary fetches, they might be worth for some of you in some of your decks. And maybe some people don't know the panoramas exist because, sorry, remind me, when was this again? Oh yeah, 2008. Jesus. All right. The special lands. I don't think there's anything in here that is necessarily that good. But yeah. Also, I mean, extra land drops. Sure. Let's see if Dryad of the Elysian Grove is in here already. It is. Extra land drops just make it so you can do it more so at sorcery speed. But really, I think the goal is to not trigger the second landfall the second time. let me start over. I think the goal shouldn't be to trigger Zimone at sorcery speed for the second time with Nature's Lore and Dryad, but instead with those fetches. Okay. I'm gonna add all of these, and then we can quickly summarize what we did today. I'm proud. My voice made it somewhat through those 2 hours. Oh my God, it's not even that much. I'm never gonna be a streamer. All right, let's quickly summarize what we did today. We started off the day with Taunos. So T-O. I guess I went way too far. Taunos, a guy who makes copies whenever you cast a beast or bird creature spell. What we said was, okay, first let's talk about the mana cost. It's a 5 mana commander that you want as soon as possible. You want the 1 into 3 into 5 mana curve. First thing that I consider when I play a green commander is, what does my ramp package look like? Second, we said, okay, it's super obvious. You look at the best beasts, you look at the best birds that you want to copy. I love Curiosity Crafter, 4 mana, 3/3. You have no maximum hand size, which is not that important. But whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And of course, Taunos makes a bunch of creature tokens. If you have the cards in hand, and this fills your hand. So they work super nicely in tandem. Whatever best beast you want, Elder Gargaroth, Thragtusk. There's probably a million better ones. Who cares? If you create high value tokens, you are playing Parallel Lives and you are playing Populate. And if you have a super good triggered or activated ability, you can play cards like Strionic Resonator, which just copies target triggered ability. Next, we talked about the Pride of Hull-Clad. An 11 mana commander that gets cheaper the more toughness you have. And it makes it so whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw cards equal to its toughness. Now that means an 0/5 won't draw you cards, but a 1/5 will draw you 5 cards if it hits someone. We said that while Defender isn't necessarily a requirement, Defenders just happen to have a lot of power. A lot of toughness. X-Men Guardian and Overgrown Battlements are nice payoffs for playing a bunch of Defenders. To get around this restriction of your creatures actually having to deal damage, you're going to play a bunch of cards that say creatures deal damage equal to their toughness rather than their power. Right? That's obvious. Assault Formation, similar effect. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. And then you're going to be playing all of these 0/5s, these 0/8s, these 0/17s, whatever. And you're going to be playing a bunch of cards that hate on high power. Yes, they exist. Ensnaring Bridge, creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. Meekstone. Power, creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap. Noetic Scales, 4 mana. During each player's upkeep, return to owner's hand each creature that player controls with power greater than the number of cards in his or her hand. Then we talked about Troyan, the Gutsy Explorer. A 3-drop that pretty much simply ramps you for 2, but only for spells that cost 5 or more, or spells that have X in their mana cost. It's a 3 mana commander, so you are going to be playing Birds of Paradise. Special shout out here to Green's Sun GSC, Green Sun Zenith, a 1x spell that searches the library for a green creature card. Now, this is not only a wonderfully flexible tutor for good payoffs, it is also a 1 mana ramp spell if you play Dryad Arbor in your deck. You simply pay 1. This is a creature that costs 0, but it's also a land, so it ramps, obviously. And then you have the classic 1 into 3 curve. And then technically, the turn after you have 6 mana. So you're looking to cast the best 6 mana creatures or spells in general. One example could be a Consecrated Sphinx. We also talked about, or quickly glanced over Culling Scales, a hate piece, a stacks piece, 3 mana at the beginning of your upkeep.
Destroy target non-land permanent with the lowest converted mana cost among non-land permanents in play. You need to be a little careful if you play a bunch of Birds of Paradise. You'll be having a bunch of one-cost cards as well, so it might not be a good fit in your deck. It does deserve a shout out. And then there's a bunch of cards that just care about high mana value. One of them, Emoti, could be a commander as well. Spells you cast with converted mana cost 6 or greater, have Cascade. Vanifar, quite close to what we just talked about. 4 mana card. She cloaks a card from your hand. That means you put it face down as a 2/2, and it has Ward 2. We talked about the synergy pieces like Trail of Mysteries and Threats Around Every Corner that reward you for playing cards face down. We talked about Ixidor, which could be a mono blue commander also, and I think I mentioned him in my video back then. That for 3 mana turns creatures face down creatures face up. We talked about how you can cheat things into play if you cloak an expensive card from your hand, and then you exile it, it returns face up. And we talked about the classic, so uncloaking a card or unmorphing a card is a special action that you can do at instant speed, and technically, like, it doesn't even use the stack, so it's more than instant speed, I guess. And that means if you can get your hands on cards like Seedborn Muse and Wilderness Reclamation that make it so you have more mana during opponents' turns, it's probably advised. Verazol, the Split Current, is a 2 and X commander, blue-green X. It enters with +1/+1 counters on it equal to the mana spent to cast it. That means if you just play him for 2, by the way, you already get 2 counters, because it doesn't care about X, it just cares about the mana you spent. And it also means if your command text goes up, this will naturally enter with more counters on it, which is pretty cool. What does it actually do? Well, when you cast a kicked spell, you may remove 2 +1/+1 counter from this guy. If you do, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. A copy of a permanent becomes a token. Okay, we talked about a bunch of things. You just look at the best kicked spells. That's definitely the first step. Take the best ones. I think you should also include cards, especially Everflowing Chalice is like a perfect piece. It has a multi-kicker, so you can kick it like 6-7 times. Remove 2 counters, and like, I mean, 6-7, of course, is like, I didn't even mean to make the joke. I hate that joke, it's so bad. But yeah, it's gonna tap for a bunch of mana, and if you get 2 copies of it, that's very nice. There is cards that say, like, whenever you kick or kicked spells cost less or whatever, those cards are great. And then, since your commander cares about +1/+1 counters, it is possible that you're playing a bunch of proliferate cards or hardened scale type cards. I'm not sure how that will actually play out. But yeah, that's what I would recommend. And then technically we can also say, like, okay, you're populating, so you could be playing cards like Parallel Lives, right? If you kick a do we have a kicked creature in here? Did I actually not put a single kick creature in here? Technically, if you were to kick a creature, right, a copy of a permanent becomes a token. If an effect would create a token, create twice that many tokens. That works quite nicely. Next, we talked about Volo, who creates quite a few tokens. It's a 4 mana 3/2. Whenever you cast a creature spell that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control already, or a creature card in your graveyard, copy that spell. First disclaimer, the PSA is, do not play a single shapeshifter. It ruins the entire Volo thing. Yes, you're making tokens, you're playing Parallel Lives, you're playing Populate, and then it becomes a tedious deck building process where you go through every creature type and try to find the best combination of creature types that do not have a single overlap. Very importantly, in my opinion, your 2 mana ramp package should consist mostly of creatures, and of course mostly of creatures that do not share a creature type. Then we talked about Vorl, the Hull-clad, Vorl of the Hull-clad. Oh, so these guys belong together, the crocodile, elk, turtle, and this guy. 3 mana 1/4, human merfolk, green blue, tap, double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. So whenever you think counter, you think proliferate. Thrumming Bird, Inexorable Tide. My personal favorite of these cards, Dreamtide Whale, a 3 mana 7/5 that has Vanishing 2, so it goes away after 2 upkeeps, but whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you proliferate, meaning you can trigger this, your opponents are going to trigger this. We talked about artifacts that have counters and tap for mana. Those are obviously insane. There's a couple of alternate win conditions that care about counters, most notably the Millennium Calendar and the Darksteel Reactor. And something that I would be most excited about playing in my deck is lands that have counters on them. There is storage counters and depletion counters. Now, the depletion counters work that nicely with your commander because you're going to be tapping that land. It will only have 1 counter, and then doubling it will only put it to 2. But you're playing a bunch of proliferate, and really that is where you get things going, in my opinion. And then once you reach like 3 or 4 storage counters, you're quite happy to double that number and make it 8 counters, so you can remove 8 storage counters for 8 mana. Then we talked about the unpronounceable, the creature whose name shall not be named, the Smiling Flood, a 6 mana 6/6 that has some flavor text of when it enters or attacks, you put a flood counter on target land. That land becomes an island in addition to its other types. As long as it has a flood counter on it, this remains even after your Smiling Flood is gone. But the real payoff is at the beginning of your end step, untap each permanent you control with a counter on it. This means, yes, Everflowing Chalice, Astral Cornucopia are really good. There's a couple of other things that create flood counters, but we don't care. Here, I would focus on, again, in the video, those lands that enter with a counter on them already, because this guy doesn't care about flood counters specifically, it just needs to be a counter. And then if at your end step all of your lands untap and all of your creatures untap, you really can't go wrong. You can go full swing with a board full of creatures with +1/+1 counters, or you could be untapping just lands and be holding up a flash spell like Amphibian Downpour. It really doesn't matter. And then we just talked about Zimone, so I'm not gonna reiterate. It's one more face down commander. You're playing face down payoffs. And you're playing a bunch of fetch lands because it's a landfall commander. And the dream is to instant speed after blocks, flip upside an Ancient Silver Dragon or the likes. Alright. I know yesterday I said that I might stream Slay the Spire today, but in my time zone, like, it's gonna be a while until the game releases. It's like 5 more hours, so it's more likely gonna happen on probably Saturday. Tomorrow I might not stream. And then I'm gonna take like 1 stream to just play Slay the Spire, and then I might go to a Magic first and then Slay the Spire later, depending on how much I like the game. Because I've been looking forward to it so much. I almost have 400 hours in the first part. So yeah, I'm super hyped for that game, and I think the Venn diagram of Magic players and Slay the Spire enjoyers is probably a circle. For now, that does it. I actually managed to go through all the interesting blue-green commanders, at least in my opinion. That means now, you can hear my voice break already, but that means probably tomorrow I'll finish recording the red-white video, the Boros video. I'll try to have it out by maybe Monday next week. And Simic will come out in 2 weeks, hopefully. In the meantime, we might take a look at partner commanders. But yeah. That's it for today. Always remember, be kind to yourself and others. Goodbye.